Hello and welcome to this live special of Don't Forget Your Tickets. In fact, it's a name change of the ticketingpodcast.com. And Don't Forget Your Tickets was made because we shouldn't forget about the tickets when you're going to an event, obviously, because then you have to queue. And also, you shouldn't forget about the ticketing manager, the heroes of the event industry that doesn't hear anything when things go right, but hear a lot when things go wrong. Then everyone asks for the ticketing manager. And that's why we had the idea of starting this podcast, and I'm going to continue to do so. And today we are doing an interview in person here at stage at the Data Talks conference, which has been very interesting so far. And we are at Cherry Red Record Stadium in London, and that's the home of AFC Wimbledon. With me on stage is a CEO and a founder who started his career as a senior associate at PwC and went from there to the position as commercial finance business partner and later CFO at Kantar before he funded NOQ almost 6 years ago. And I always thought that CFOs were very risk averse and didn't start their own companies, but here we are today. So let's give a warm welcome to Param Kanabar, CEO and founder of the NOQ Group. It's great to have you here, Param. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you everyone for the warm welcome. Excited for the rest of the show.
Amazing. But first of all, I have to say, when I heard NOQ, that's an amazing name. I mean, who likes a queue? I'm sure no one in this audience likes the queue, but probably no one here used to stay in the queue either because of what they work with. But how did the name come about?
Yeah, so I'm just some background. I'm born in Lisbon in Portugal, and often I go and see my dad's side of the family in Portugal. And I think in 2017 I was in a concert called Rock in Rio. Justin Timberlake, A-Team, Lord. It was great. And it was about 5 pints in, and it took 45 minutes to get the 6th one. And I just became so sober. I was having the best time with my cousins. And I just, you know when you just have such an amazing time, but you're standing in a line, it's the round that you've got to go get for 4 other people, and they're just there having the time of their life, and you're standing in a line. That's when I was like, hold on, is there something we can do about that? And that's how NOQ started. And that's how, just festivals and events became a thing that we wanted to tackle.
Amazing. There's nothing about that story on LinkedIn, though, but it's good that you're truthful there in front of you.
I'm not a massive social media person, I should say, but I'll try and do better.
Great, and I'm sure, there's a lot of good ideas coming out of Party, but preventing queues, that is one of the best ones I've heard so far. And you're saying that NOQ is servicing the events and hospitality sector by improving its efficiency and increasing revenues through tech. At least, that's what your LinkedIn says, right? So, but tell us more. How are you killing the queues? I mean, what queues are we talking about? Is it the airports? Is it the festivals? Is it the stadiums? Or where are we?
I think, in general, for individuals and for every business, it's important to have some sort of an aspiration or a motivation to drive towards. I think having no queues is a North Star for us. It's like our ambition of where we want to get to. Would you eliminate queues completely? I guess the question is, do you even want to eliminate queues completely because it makes it look like it's not doing so well, or it's, the ambiance isn't there. But I think driving towards that reduction in queue and managing that is the most important thing. And I think everything we've done through our features, functionalities over the last X amount of years is driving for that efficiency. You asked a little bit about how are we doing that. I think over the years, I've learned that there are multiple stakeholders involved whenever you're doing large-scale events or events at stadiums, etc. You've got your customers, you've got your organizers or management companies. Quite often stadiums have stadium management companies. You've got your stadium owners. You might have those independent vendors that sell food at a fan zone or outside of the stadium. And then you've got, within the stadium itself, you've got your operations, your marketing, your finance teams. Now, most of the time, people choose a system that makes sense for the operator. Quite often, they don't think about all the different stakeholders that exist and building a system that makes sense for everyone. And that's what we've been trying to do, trying to understand. So my CFO background really made NOQ, I hope, a financial operating system. But, you know, tangible reports, accessible data to then improve on future performances. But most importantly, giving the customers what they want as well. So let's take the customers as a first example. If I'm standing in the line, I don't want my tills to fail, right? I want a fast system that is reliable at all times. I don't want it to go down. I don't want internet to go down and somebody says, hey, it's cash only today. So those are the kinds of things that we try and solve at a very standard level for the customer. Then for the operations people, it's very much, you know, you might get a new agency staff member come in for the first time and they're operating a new till system for the first time. And they've never seen it. They don't know how to go in and add a cart that says Carling or JD with double shots of this and that. And it takes 35 seconds for them to just process that order. Now, how do you make a system that's intuitive for somebody to pick that up for the first time and use it? And that's kind of what we've been working on the ground, building a very intuitive but a simple system. I think, you know, I was actually speaking to the CTO of TicketCo and you know, I hadn't had much of a conversation with him, but I think my first question to him would be, how do you build a product that has all the features people want whilst being simple? And that's the hardest blend to kind of build. On the operating side, you're more looking at our back of house types of systems where you want to know which location's doing the most, where does the stock need to get transferred to. If I've got 15 people in this bar and that bar out there is more busier, how do I move not only just the resource but also the till system? How is it? Is it mobile? Quite often you find old school systems where they're all stuck to the tabletops and you can't really shift them to where they need to go to, and you're not really busting queues at that point. So that's important from an operations perspective. From a finance perspective, you're more looking at the data part, Power BI, data trending, comparisons to like for like is important. Quite often people look at data and say, hey, this is what I know about data. But when you're doing apples and oranges, it doesn't make sense, right? So you really need to have someone who understands that piece to really do the right comparisons, because sometimes it can be detrimental to do the wrong ones and not put the right steps in place. So that's more on the finance side. And then the marketing side is more looking at any sort of data conversation starts with data capturing first. What tools do you have in place to capture all of that? Is it consistent? Again, is it apples to apples across the different platforms? And then how do you warehouse that? And then the next part of that becomes a bit more sexier around the insights and how you go in and do that. So it's a bit more of an all-rounded approach that we look at.
Well, it's very interesting. And I think when people look at what you're doing, I think you're lucky man, because you work with the things that people look forward to doing in the weekends, right? But that also entails a lot of risk, because let's say, I mean, you're in London, it's been raining a lot. We are from Bergen, it rains all the time, so here is a change actually. But it's a beautiful day, and you're going to the festival in the park, and you're ready for your first beer, and the tills doesn't work. People get pretty pissed off if that doesn't happen, does it? How do you secure that the system just functions every time without stop?
Yeah, a long time back, please don't quote me on where I found this data point, but if I remember correctly, the English crowd, typically the worst thing that could happen is the weather. The second thing is the transport of getting there, right? And then the third is queues, right? So yeah, in terms of making sure everything works at all times, there's no such thing as that in tech, I'll be honest, right? You're always gonna, I mean, Microsoft had issues, right? And all the biggest companies would have issues at some point in time. It's the mitigation factors that you put in place. Operationally, how can you also manage that? And for us, it's about ensuring our systems can work on Wi-Fi, 3G, 4G, 5G, offline. If the battery's gone down, can you put the battery into the machine? Because some machines, you can't really take the battery out. You know, the reality is when you're dealing with on-site events, the hardware component is crucial. All software typically sit on hardware, and it's making sure that you can manage those devices effectively from your back-end system, and do that all quickly on the ground. And I think that's the key. If something's gone down, having a system to say why it's gone down, and then deploying the thing that is working very quickly. So over the years, that's what we've really built. And I think our device management is an awesome module on the back end, without going into too much detail, but that's crucial. Yeah.
Well, I surely have some crazy stories from my early ticketing days, and I'm sure you have some as well. You can share it if you want to.
What crazy stories? I think, for me, I think the biggest changes I've seen over the years is just the team, right? Like when we first started off, there was 3 of us, right? And now there's close to about 40 of us. And what I've seen is the stories are becoming crazier because now I'm no longer involved in them. So now I'm like a part of listening to what's happening out there. And I don't want to explain the stories at the moment because I don't know if this is the right place, but some of the stuff I am seeing and hearing is interesting. And I think, I don't know, I mean, a question to you would be, you've been around, what, for 10 years, 12 years, right, as a company. But did you also find that the stories are getting crazier? Because the ones before were a bit more manageable and controllable because it was me and 2 other people, right? Now it's like, hey, like, what's going on there? Tell me more.
It's definitely more at scale. And that also is a huge risk, right? But I guess we'll read more about it in the book when that's written in a couple of years. So a little bit back to, I mean, the customers. And I mean, one thing is customer, but I think a better question will be, who are you actually helping?
Yeah, so, I mean, I explained a bit about Rock in Rio, which was a festival, right? So initially our core focus was large-scale events, right? But what we realized as time went on, it wasn't just about the festival event spaces. The problem was around managing multiple vendors. Now, you're talking about catering companies, merch operators, ticketing companies, payment systems. Somebody might, I mean, for stadiums specifically, you might have somebody providing your self-service kiosks. You might have somebody doing your website e-commerce with Shopify, or you might have somebody doing, I mean, so many suppliers, but then also so many stakeholders, and different people are signing off on different supply arrangements, and it's a matrix of short-term vision in my perspective, right? And wherever those types of complexities are there, that's where we would operate more as a consultant to kind of understand the matrix of that complexity and building a long-term plan, because it's never like, hey, I'm going to change everything today. It's more like a staggered approach, and trying to find the right people in the room to put their hands up for a plan like that is the hardest part. But then more so on who are the customers? Well, it's the ones that want to be on that journey, right? And where that problem is really like a big problem. And so at the moment, we do a lot of large-scale events. In sports specifically, we work with SailGP, for example, globally. We've done some events with Live Golf. We work with some of the events at PGA Tour. We've been doing the Scottish Open for a long time, which is part of the DP Tour. More so from a local club perspective, we've recently been working with Chinner, guys like out in Wales, Scarlets Rugby, just down the road, Charlton Football Club. So trying to work with operators who are in the same wavelength in terms of the long-term planning and having that multi-vendor management issue and multi-supplier issue. That's really going back to this data point. I mean, if you've got all of those problems and you want to learn from data, you're not helping yourself by having such a fragmented solution.
You see a change. I mean, we're here at a data conference where the key topic is understanding, customer data, and utilize that for good decision making, right? Do you see your company NOQ as being part of a more integrated system now, more than before?
I think integrated system is one thing, but integrated member of the team as well, right? Because it's a small example, but quite often when you displace a previous operator, and the client will be like, oh my God, you have this feature. the reality is that probably most of the times that other supplier also had that feature, right? Because, I mean, you know, from a ticketing perspective, there are other ticketing companies out there, but the reality is that how much of your ticketing system did somebody understand, right? So I believe the customer success piece is crucial, right? So does the way your account management team speak to the client resonate to how the client learns, understands, champions your product is important, right? And I think we focus heavily on that to be a not just a tech partner, but a partner in general to kind of help people go down that journey. I think this industry in particular is a little bit further behind, to be honest with you, than some of the other industries. And so that level of support is always a must, in my opinion. But again, it just, you know, everyone's got their own thoughts on how important that is today. Everyone wants to, deal with the fire that is today versus the future. So I think, yeah, that's our ethos, trying to work with people, not just from a tech perspective, but more on a long-term vision and an advisory perspective as well.
So, I mean, you've done great, right? You've been growing. You're over 40 people. That's a lot of things to manage. And as you're saying, challenges are at scale. But what would you say is your greatest achievement so far, or is that yet to come?
It's hard. People say you should always separate business, never mix business and pleasure, right? So, but it's hard as a founder. You find that your business is, well, it's my pleasure, right? It's like everything I live for at the moment. I mean, there's lots of other stuff, but it's one of my biggest drivers. You asked, do I have kids? I don't have kids. This is my baby, right? So it's very much about business and pleasure together. And so I think the answer to that question would be, like, from a personal perspective, which is actually a little bit more important than some of the professional side. And I think what I've seen over the years now is friendships being developed within NOQ. And someone's asked me this before, and I think my answer has always been the same. It's like the friendships within the organization are awesome to see. I think building friends is a very personal thing to somebody. And you can only really build a true friend if you're comfortable or you're open to it. And I think the fact that NOQ is able to create an environment like that at work is why we're seeing that develop. We went kickboxing yesterday, which was great. So stuff like that, I think that's the big change. I mean, Rupert's on the floor here, and he's worked 6 months with NOQ, and I've probably had like 3 holidays with him, right? So it's like, well, I say holidays, but work as well, right? But it's very much about that side of it, I'd say. On a professional basis, I think, for me, this is again a really strange example, but I think when we first started off, people only sometimes see value in savings, and that's one way of looking at it, but I look at it as an investment, right? So when conversations always become about, hey, but I'm getting this charge and you're charging me X, and again, it's apples and apples or apples versus oranges, right? What are you costing and what are you comparing it to? I'm not here for the short-term gain, but I just want to have a level conversation. And I think this year, that was never even part of the conversations. It was more like they understand the product and the value. And I think value is not always monetary, right? Value could be in various things. Is it an improvement for your staff? Is there less headache with your labor, right? That's my biggest worry right now with 40 people. It's like, hey, like, I might have an issue with my finance person, or I might have an issue with my like, how do you keep your staff happy, right? So that's also value. Are you learning from a system for the future? That's also value. So when it comes down to making a decision on a system, how do you have a more all-rounded conversation versus just pricing is a tremendous achievement, I think. We've stopped doing that, right? Obviously, pricing has a part to play in it, but it's more of an all-rounded conversation. And I look at it as like a example, like, sometimes you go to all these fancy restaurants and you look at the menu and like, yeah, this is great, but there's no price against that lobster. You just get the lobster for this. You're like, all right, this is what I want to get. And I think it's driving that ethos is like there's more to value and what we're trying to achieve together with the trust, working with the right people, to then just talking pricing. And I think if people keep holding themselves back with that mindset, I don't think you can invest for the future.
So, I mean, you've done an impressive accomplishment, right? And you didn't start too many years ago, right? When you decided to start this company, was it the passion for making events better or killing queues that drove it forward? Which hence where the name came from, you mentioned. Or was it an underlying wish of running your own business eventually? I mean, was it if you see my point, was it the mission in itself, or was it the wish for running your own company?
Yeah, my whole background, like family-wise, everyone has pretty much had businesses in the past, right? Less so the current generation, but my dad's generation and my uncles and everyone just somewhat went to different countries and started X, Y, Z, and it's all been entrepreneurial spirit, to be honest, and risk-taking. I think I've always had the risk-taking side in me, always. Trying to be brave on something that you might not see today is important. Sticking by it is important. But I think business strategy is also very important. And I think I've had so many ideas, from selling Pokemon cards to stickers from the Premiership. Like, I mean, I used to go to a corner store and get the football stickers, put it into a magazine and sell that same magazine for a higher price to my friend and be like, hey, that'll be my pocket money, right? And so, and then, selling marbles and stuff like that. And it's like, there's one thing where it's like you've got business ideas, but then there's another sticking by something that is a bit more solid. And I think as the years went on, my previous role really helped me. I mean, when I became the CFO for the entity I was working under, that was a $4 billion business annually. North America was the region I was kind of within, so a smaller region of that 4 billion, but it's a huge organization. And when I was asked to do that role, I was 28 years old, and I'm sitting there with very senior people, a lot more older than me. So I think winning that respect from them was also a little bit difficult initially. Showing that I'm worth the role that I'm currently in, operating at, is also important. And as that started happening, I realized my communication skills, my leadership skills, or quite often people have ideas, but how can you translate that idea into reality or get others to see the same vision is very difficult. And I think I started being able to do that, which really made me feel like I've got enough to lead a new startup. And so that's how it all started. I wanted to have a nice blend of vision and innate founder things like risk-taking and all of that with the right business strategy mindset as well.
Mm. And I mean, you come from the role as CFO of a huge company. How would you say the role of CFO has helped you in the role you have now?
Yeah, you said that most CFOs are risk averse, etc. Which, yeah, you always have to look at the downside, right, and the potential risks. NOQ conceptually started 6 years ago. So if you go into Companies House and incorporated February 2019, I believe. But from a actual trading perspective, it's been just shy of 3 years, right? So I went full time onto the project October 2021. So the first 3 years was just, quite frankly, just sitting there as an incorporated business, but not really doing anything, right? We don't have any trading on it or anything like that. And that was the risk-averse side of me. It was like, hey, I can't leave what I'm doing. I always had the idea, but I can't leave what I'm doing. I'm getting promoted, I'm doing X, Y, Z, I'm getting paid well. I was in New York, I was like, oh, this is great. And I never had the courage at the time to leave. And I think also the 3 years that I ended up doing that, I learned all the things that I'm utilizing right now. So that was, I think, a blessing in disguise. When the time was right, making that jump from having a paid salary to basically not really getting paid much and just living life to a very basic level was difficult. And I think that transition and the last 3 years, what we've done has been amazing. We've changed in various different ways. We started off as a founder-led problem as a consumer, ended up becoming more of a B2B, direct-to-business type of a model, and utilizing the financial career that I've had to then become a financial operating system versus just being a system to reduce queues. Even though the name is NOQ, it's turned into more than just that.
And where are you in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? Where is NOQ then?
Yeah, I think personally, it will be about having 500 of the biggest festivals globally. This year we've been lucky enough to do close to 100. It's been a very good year. We've been growing 4, 5, 6x over the last 2-3 years, year on year. Next year looks very exciting, but I think 5 years from now, it's very much 500 plus festivals globally. We have operated 7 different countries right now, but we don't really go in and market or sell into those countries. Our clients organically are taking us to those countries, so it's nice to see. But more on the venue side, events venue side, please don't ask me why, but I'm a big Man United fan. I'll say that very quickly. But the Theatre of Dreams would be awesome. Doing Old Trafford would be like crazy for me.
And no queues.
Sorry?
And no queues.
And I mean, and more than just Old Trafford, I'm a big cricket fan as well. So yeah, the home of cricket, which is just down the corner, would be great.
Well, maybe we should do it together.
100%.
All right. So, yeah, as we wrap up, we should touch a little bit on the data side of things, right? You mentioned it briefly, but when it comes to data and the way clubs are utilizing data, is it like our brains, we're using 10% of what's available out there, or are we using more? And how good are specifically football clubs to utilizing data and understanding it?
Yeah, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but from what I've seen, there's not a massive influx of data analysts and data engineers and finance geeks moving over to the sporting entertainment industry. I just haven't seen as much of that. More they're choosing sectors like finance sectors, insurance sectors, and that's makes sense. But not many people make that jump into entertainment and sports. And some of the bigger operators are starting to hire those types of individuals, but not everyone's got access to those resources. So I think Premier League football clubs, for example, would have those resources. Does League One, League Two, Championship have that same availability? So how does, some of the more medium-sized clubs have the opportunity to compete on the same level of data? And I think, to be honest with you, it's working like brands like us, right? Because it's like what you really want to do is have a partner who understands that space, has other festivals, events, and stadiums under their belt, so that they can, help with what's happening or what's trending in the market, to kind of help that partner to say, hey, this is how you might want to do this. This is how you might want to do that. So I think that piece of it in this current industry is missing. And I think the problem is the biggest problem is that short-term vision of using loads of different tech stacks. They don't have that data to start with in the first place. And a lot of the bigger clubs are tackling that, right? They're tackling that with, like Spurs, the new football stadium out of Spurs is awesome. They got great technology. And when you look at America, they've got loads of good technology out in the sports industry. But I think the UK in particular, in the sports side, is still a work in progress. And the likes of us hopefully will help move that piece.
Big potential for the future, for sure. So last question today, Param, and thank you so much for the honest stories and the things you've told us today. But is there one key lesson you learned after you started your own company and made the leap, because that's what you did, right? Made the leap to setting up and cutting the wages and the career for running your own company. What did you wish that you knew when you started?
I feel like I knew I followed this quote before, but when you're into the whole madness and what looks like a tornado, you forget it, right? And there's a quote where it's, play each ball on its own merit, right? So when you're batting in cricket, the ball's about to come out, you need to assess what type of a delivery that's going to be, right? Is it going to be a bouncer? Is it a Yorker? Is it going to come straight at your head? And so kind of assessing that and picking and choosing the type of shot you want to play is important. At the very beginning, it was, you know, oh my God, this is what we're going to do. This is exactly what it's going to be like in a year. And just kind of marrying certain ideas is I think, an overkill, right? It's like trying to be a bit more flexible, but focused at the same time is the hardest blend. One of our investors that I met about a few months ago was saying less is more, right? And the more I follow that principle, less is more, is actually just, if I could say that to any new founder, it's like less is more. You know, I've got a couple of people that have been pitching ideas to me for their new startup, and I was like, hey, this just sounds like 100 features, right? But let's just start with the one concept and let's just work on that, right? And I think that's the key. But at the same time, being flexible that might not be the right idea. So it's a little bit of a hybrid. And I think, yeah, surround yourself with the right people is probably the most important thing.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Param. And thank you for joining us today on this live podcast of Don't Forget Your Tickets, our new name, which we're very proud of, launching today. And I hope everyone in the audience has enjoyed. I hope everyone who's listened in has enjoyed. And I hope you've enjoyed, Param.
Yeah, it was a great time. I was telling Eric, Carl, sorry, and for me, podcasts is great for, of course, for everyone, but also personally as well. Just to have a conversation is actually very relaxing and a fun thing to do. So thank you for the invite.
Great that you enjoyed it. Super cool to have you here, and thank you for coming. Until next time, everyone, this podcast has been powered by Ticketco. We are super proud to be here on the Data Talks conference. If you haven't heard of Data Talks, check it out, and check out Ticketco as well if you have time. Have a good day.